Good morning. I got up again. It's 9:20. Let's read about New York City. I'm eating a little food, but let's close my door and need a little water. So I need to reading many hundreds of hours because there's a lot of stuff to read about United States, all these many states and big cities. So that will take many months, and I cannot do this every day. Just do it when I feel like. But let's read the New York City and history of New York City, I think. Or maybe we should read, of course we need to read New York State. We need to read it. So United States is very big. It's a lot bigger than whole Europe. But I need it for my Microsoft Flight Simulator. In the future I will get this Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, I hope. Then I will fly around. I can talk about what I know about United States. When I read about a city, all bigger cities have a webpage on the Wikipedia. No, if you have an airport, small to a city like 10,000 citizens, you can find it on Wikipedia. Then you can talk about the cities and the lakes and the rivers. So I need half a minute to get started. I forgot to close my door. So let's read this. Look New York City later today.
New York City. NYC and New York redirect here. For other uses, see New York City, disambiguation, NYC, disambiguation, and New York, disambiguation. New York, often called New York City or NYC, is the most populous city in the United States, located at the southern tip of New York State on one of the world's largest natural harbors. The city comprises 5 boroughs, each coextensive with a respective county. The city is the geographical and demographic center of both the Northeast megalopolis and the New York metropolitan area, the largest metropolitan area in the United States by both population and urban area. New York is a global center of finance and commerce, culture, technology, entertainment and media, academics and scientific output, the arts and fashion, and, as home to the headquarters of the United Nations, international diplomacy. With an estimated population in 2024 of 8,478,072 distributed over 300.46 square miles, 778.2 kilometers, the city is the most densely populated major city in the United States. New York City has more than double the population of Los Angeles, the nation's second most populous city. With more than 20.1 million people in its metropolitan statistical area and 23.5 million in its combined statistical area as of 2020, New York City is one of the world's most populous megacities. The city and its metropolitan area are the premier gateway for legal immigration to the United States. As many as 800 languages are spoken in New York City, making it the most linguistically diverse city in the world. In 2021, the city was home to nearly 3.1 million residents born outside the United States, the largest foreign-born population of any city in the world. New York City traces its origins to Fort Amsterdam and a trading post founded on Manhattan Island by Dutch colonists around 1624. The settlement was named New Amsterdam in 1626 and was chartered as a city in 1653. The city came under English control in 1664 and was temporarily renamed New York after King Charles II granted the lands to his brother, the Duke of York, before being permanently renamed New York in November 1674. Following independence from Great Britain, the city was the national capital of the United States from 1785 until 1790. The modern city was formed by the 1898 consolidation of its 5 boroughs, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island. Anchored by Wall Street in the financial district, Manhattan, New York City has been called both the world's premier financial and fintech center and the most economically powerful city in the world. As of 2022, the New York metropolitan area is the largest metropolitan economy in the world, with a gross metropolitan product of over $2.16 trillion. The New York metropolitan area's economy is larger than all but 9 countries in the world. Despite having a 24/7 rapid transit system, New York also leads the world in urban automobile traffic congestion. The city is home to the world's 2 largest stock exchanges by market capitalization of their listed companies, the New York Stock Exchange and Nasdaq. New York City is an established safe haven for global investors. As of 2023, New York City is the most expensive city in the world for expatriates and has by a wide margin the highest residential rents of any city in the nation, and Fifth Avenue is the most expensive shopping street in the world. New York City is home by a significant margin to the highest number of billionaires, individuals of ultra-high net worth, greater than $30 million, and millionaires of any city in the world. Etymology. See also, nicknames of New York City. In 1664, New York was named in honor of the Duke of York, later King James II of England. James's elder brother, King Charles II, appointed him proprietor of the former territory of New Netherland, including the city of New Amsterdam, when the Kingdom of England seized it from Dutch control. History. Main articles: History of New York City and Timeline of New York City. Further information: History of Manhattan, Timeline of Brooklyn, Timeline of Queens, Timeline of the Bronx, and Timeline of Staten Island. Early history. Main article: History of New York City, Prehistory 1664. In the pre-Columbian era, the area of present-day New York City was inhabited by Algonquians, including the Lenape. Their homeland, known as Lenapehoking, included the present-day areas of Staten Island, Manhattan, the Bronx, the western portion of Long Island, including Brooklyn and Queens, and the lower Hudson Valley. The first documented visit into New York Harbor by a European was in 1524 by explorer Giovanni the Verrazzano. He claimed the area for France and named it Nouvelle Angulum, New Angulum. A Spanish expedition, led by the Portuguese Captain Estevão Gomes sailing for Emperor Charles V, arrived in New York Harbor in January 1525 and charted the mouth of the Hudson River, which he named Rio de San Antonio, St. Anthony's River. In 1609, the English explorer Henry Hudson rediscovered New York Harbor while searching for the Northwest Passage to the Orient for the Dutch East India Company. He sailed up what the Dutch called North River, now the Hudson River, named first by Hudson as the Mauritius after Maurice, Prince of Orange. Hudson claimed the region for the Dutch East India Company. In 1614, the area between Cape Cod and Delaware Bay was claimed by the Netherlands and called Nieuw Nederland, New Netherland. The first non-Native American inhabitant of what became New York City was Juan Rodriguez, a merchant from Santo Domingo who arrived in Manhattan during the winter of 1613-14, trapping for pelts and trading with the local population as a representative of the Dutch. Dutch rule. Main articles: New Amsterdam, Fort Amsterdam, and New Netherland. A permanent European presence near New York Harbor was established in 1624, making New York the 12th oldest continuously occupied European established settlement in the continental United States, with the founding of a Dutch fur trading settlement on Governor's Island. In 1625, construction was started on a citadel and Fort Amsterdam, later called Nieuw Amsterdam, New Amsterdam, on present-day Manhattan Island. The colony of New Amsterdam extended from the southern tip of Manhattan to modern-day Wall Street, where a 12-foot, 3.7 m, wooden stockade was built in 1653 to protect against Native American and English raids. In 1626, the Dutch colonial director General Peter Minuit, as charged by the Dutch West India Company, purchased the island of Manhattan from the Kanakas, a small Lenape band, for the value of 60 guilders, about $900 in 2018. A frequently told but disproved legend claims that Manhattan was purchased for $24 worth of glass beads. Following the purchase, New Amsterdam grew slowly. To attract settlers, the Dutch instituted the patroon system in 1628, whereby wealthy Dutchmen, patroons, or patrons, who brought 50 colonists to New Netherland would be awarded land, local political autonomy, and rights to participate in the lucrative fur trade. This program had little success. Since 1621, the Dutch West India Company had operated as a monopoly in New Netherland, on authority granted by the Dutch States General. In 1639-1640, in an effort to bolster economic growth, the Dutch West India Company relinquished its monopoly over the fur trade, leading to growth in the production and trade of food, timber, tobacco, and slaves, particularly with the Dutch West Indies. In 1647, Peter Stuyvesant began his tenure as the last Director General of New Netherland. During his tenure, the population of New Netherland grew from 2,000 to 8,000. Stuyvesant has been credited with improving law and order, however, he earned a reputation as a despotic leader. He instituted regulations on liquor sales, attempted to assert control over the Dutch Reformed Church, and blocked other religious groups from establishing houses of worship. English rule. Main articles: Province of New York and History of New York City, 1665–1783. In 1664, unable to summon any significant resistance, Stuyvesant surrendered New Amsterdam to English troops, led by Colonel Richard Nichols, without bloodshed. The terms of the surrender permitted Dutch residents to remain in the colony and allowed for religious freedom. In 1667, during negotiations leading to the Treaty of Breda after the Second Anglo-Dutch War, the victorious Dutch decided to keep the nascent plantation colony of what is now Suriname, which they had gained from the English, and in return the English kept New Amsterdam. The settlement was promptly renamed New York after the Duke of York, the future King James II and VII. The Duke gave part of the colony to proprietors George Carteret and John Barclay. On the 24th of August, 1673, during the Third Anglo-Dutch War, Anthony Colve of the Dutch Navy seized New York at the behest of Cornelis Evertsen the youngest and rechristened it New Orange after William III, the Prince of Orange. The Dutch soon returned the island to England under the Treaty of Westminster of November, 1674. Several intertribal wars among the Native Americans and epidemics brought on by contact with the Europeans caused sizable population losses for the Lenape between 1660 and 1670. By 1700, the Lenape population had diminished to 200. New York experienced several yellow fever epidemics in the 18th century, losing 10% of its population in 1702 alone. In the early 18th century, New York grew in importance as a trading port while as a part of the colony of New York. It became a center of slavery, with 42% of households enslaving Africans by 1730. Most were domestic slaves. Others were hired out as labor. Slavery became integrally tied to New York's economy through the labor of slaves throughout the port, and the banking and shipping industries trading with the American South. During construction in Foley Square in the 1990s, the African burying ground was discovered. The cemetery included 10,000 to 20,000 graves of colonial-era Africans, some enslaved and some free. The 1735 trial and acquittal in Manhattan of John Peter Zinger, who had been accused of seditious libel after criticizing colonial Governor William Cosby, helped to establish freedom of the press in North America. In 1754, Columbia University was founded. American Revolution. Further information: American Revolution. The Stamp Act Congress met in New York in October 1765, as the Sons of Liberty organization emerged in the city and skirmished over the next 10 years with British troops stationed there. The Battle of Long Island, the largest battle of the American Revolutionary War, was fought in August 1776 within modern-day Brooklyn. A British rout of the Continental Army at the Battle of Fort Washington in November 1776 eliminated the last American stronghold in Manhattan, causing George Washington and his forces to retreat across the Hudson River to New Jersey, pursued by British forces. After the battle, in which the Americans were defeated, the British made the city their military and political base of operations in North America. The city was a haven for Loyalist refugees and escaped slaves who joined the British lines for freedom promised by the Crown, with as many as 10,000 escaped slaves crowded into the city during the British occupation, the largest such community on the continent. When the British forces evacuated New York at the close of the war in 1783, they transported thousands of freedmen for resettlement in Nova Scotia, England, and the Caribbean. The attempt at a peaceful solution to the war took place at the Conference House on Staten Island between American delegates, including Benjamin Franklin, and British General Lord Howe on the 11th of September, 1776. Shortly after the British occupation began, the Great Fire of New York destroyed nearly 500 buildings, about a quarter of the structures in the city, including Trinity Church. Post-Revolutionary period and early 19th century. Main article, History of New York City, 1784–1854. In January 1785, the Assembly of the Congress of the Confederation made New York City the national capital. New York was the last capital of the United States under the Articles of Confederation and the first under the Constitution. As the capital, New York City hosted the inauguration of the first president, George Washington, and the first Congress, at Federal Hall on Wall Street. Congress drafted the Bill of Rights there. The Supreme Court held its first organizational sessions in New York in 1790. In 1790, for the first time, New York City surpassed Philadelphia as the nation's largest city. At the end of 1790, the national capital was moved to Philadelphia, where it remained while the new capital in Washington, D.C. was being constructed. During the 19th century, New York City's population grew from 60,000 to 3.43 million. Under New York State's Gradual Emancipation Act of 1799, children of slave mothers were to be eventually liberated but to be held in indentured servitude until their mid to late 20s. Together with slaves freed by their masters after the Revolutionary War and escaped slaves, a significant free black population gradually developed in Manhattan. The New York Manumission Society worked for abolition and established the African Free School to educate black children. It was not until 1827 that slavery was completely abolished in the state. Free blacks struggled with discrimination and interracial abolitionist activism continued. New York City's population jumped from 123,706 in 1820, 10,886 of whom were black and of which 518 were enslaved, to 312,710 by 1840, 16,358 of whom were black. Also in the 19th century, the city was transformed by both commercial and residential development relating to its status as a national and international trading center, as well as by European immigration, respectively. The city adopted the Commissioner's Plan of 1811, which expanded the city street grid to encompass almost all of Manhattan. The 1825 completion of the Erie Canal through central New York connected the Atlantic port to the agricultural markets and commodities of the North American interior via the Hudson River and the Great Lakes. Local politics became dominated by Tammany Hall, a political machine supported by Irish and German immigrants. In 1831, New York University was founded. Several prominent American literary figures lived in New York during the 1830s and 1840s, including William Cullen Bryant, Washington Irving, Herman Melville, Rufus Wilmot Greifswald, John Keats, Nathaniel Parker Willis, and Edgar Allan Poe. Members of the business elite lobbied for the establishment of Central Park, which in 1857 became the first landscaped park in an American city. The Great Irish Famine brought a large influx of Irish immigrants, of whom more than 200,000 were living in New York by 1860, representing over a quarter of the city's population. Extensive immigration from the German provinces meant that Germans comprised another 25% of New York's population by 1860. American Civil War. Main articles: New York City in the American Civil War and History of New York City, 1855–1897. Democratic Party candidates were consistently elected to local office, increasing the city's ties to the South and its dominant party. In 1861, Mayor Fernando Wood called on the aldermen to declare independence from Albany and the United States after the South seceded, but his proposal was not acted on. Anger at new military conscription laws during the American Civil War, 1861–1865, which spared wealthier men who could afford to hire a substitute, led to the draft riots of 1863, whose most visible participants were ethnic Irish working class. The draft riots deteriorated into attacks on New York's elite, followed by attacks on black New Yorkers after fierce competition for a decade between Irish immigrants and black people for work. Rioters burned the colored orphan asylum to the ground. At least 120 people were killed. 11 black men were lynched over 5 days, and the riots forced hundreds of blacks to flee. The black population in Manhattan fell below 10,000 by 1865. The white working class had established dominance. It was one of the worst incidents of civil unrest in American history. Late 19th and early 20th century. Main articles: History of New York City, 1898–1945, and History of New York City, 1946–1977. In 1886, the Statue of Liberty, a gift from France, was dedicated in New York Harbor. The statue welcomed 14 million immigrants as they arrived via Ellis Island by ship in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and is a symbol of the United States and American ideals of liberty and peace. In 1898, the city of New York was formed with the consolidation of Brooklyn, until then a separate city, the County of New York, which then included parts of the Bronx, the County of Richmond, and the western portion of the County of Queens. The opening of the New York City subway in 1904, first built as separate private systems, helped bind the new city together. Throughout the first half of the 20th century, the city became a world center for industry, commerce, and communication. In 1904, the steamship General Slocum caught fire in the East River, killing 1,021 people. In 1911, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, the city's worst industrial disaster, killed 146 garment workers and spurred the growth of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union and major improvements in factory safety standards. New York's non-white population was 36,620 in 1890. New York City was a prime destination in the early 20th century for blacks during the Great Migration from the American South, and by 1916, New York City had the largest urban African diaspora in North America. The Harlem Renaissance of literary and cultural life flourished during the era of Prohibition. The larger economic boom generated construction of skyscrapers competing in height. New York City became the most populous urbanized area in the world in the early 1920s, overtaking London. The metropolitan area surpassed 10 million in the early 1930s, becoming the first megacity. The Great Depression saw the election of reformer Fiorello LaGuardia as mayor and the fall of Tammany Hall after 80 years of political dominance. Returning World War II veterans created a post-war economic boom and the development of large housing tracts in eastern Queens and Nassau County, with Wall Street leading America's place as the world's dominant economic power. The United Nations headquarters was completed in 1952, solidifying New York's global geopolitical influence, and the rise of abstract expressionism in the city precipitated New York's displacement of Paris as the center of the art world. late 20th and early 21st centuries. Main articles: History of New York City, 1978 present, and the 11th of September attacks. In 1969, the Stonewall riots were a series of violent protests by members of the gay community against a police raid that took place in the early morning of the 28th of June, 1969, at the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village. They are widely considered to be the single most important event